Dude, whenever we first started this, guilds would get right into Mythic very quickly. Maybe do some heroic splits to try to get some gear, but it didn't feel like it was all too many heroic splits. Now, I swear, the first couple of days are just filled with heroic splits, largely due to gearing decisions, and I think it's a lot of the time due to tier, but I think that it's just the evolution of the race to world first is making sure that you are as powerful as you possibly can be going into Mythic and making sure that you also have mains assigned.
Yeah, I don't know. This set of splits feels even, I would say, a little bit less intense maybe than the Vault ones did, especially with the loot change. So there was a big change with loot where it's you can't save the tradable status of the loot by going
Oh,
offline anymore,
yeah, that's true.
which I think has made it a little bit less like spreadsheet degeneracy. But obviously, we're still seeing multiple days worth of splits out of the top guilds before they're even going to set foot into Mythic, which is, I think, going to be a very hard feature of the current incentives to really change.
Yeah, okay, so basically in today's Race to World First recap, the things that we have to talk about, splits and gearing up, I mean, we kind of just talked about that a little bit, heroic difficulty, and then we're going to talk about like early Mythic, kind of what to expect. I saw a prediction that you thought that basically every boss up until Mythic Sarkareth was going to take less than 100 pulls, and Sarkareth was going to be obviously
That was
maybe more than
my
100
hot
pulls.
take. Yeah.
Do you think that maybe still stands?
So apparently, there's been some health hotfix buffs pushed to servers on some of the later bosses since then.
Mhm.
So not 100% confident, but it seems still maybe feasible, especially with the level of gear that guilds are going to have
Okay.
access to doing all of these splits.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you look at our recap sheet, we're on Warcraft logs right now, just kind of looking at some stuff, and you see Team Liquid still going at the time of recording this. We're gonna try to record this a few hours earlier in the future, but today we had to shuffle our schedule
Yeah.
around. Liquid is still going, and they are doing Sarkareth splits, and that, in my mind, kind of leads me to believe that they're going to start doing Mythic tomorrow at least.
Yeah, I think that that makes sense for them, right? So this is very late night for North America, right? The end of
Correct.
their second day that is approaching here, and nearly the start of the second day for Europe. Wait, start of the second day for Europe, end of the second day for NA.
Hmm.
All kind of lining up here. So yeah, it's hard to be sure, but I think that probably 2 days of mains of splits really, and then maybe a third. Maybe that third day still has some gearing up in it. I mean, there's a lot of value to be gained from Mythic Plus as well, but if you've done splits and you've got heroic gear, maybe you don't even need those items and those upgrades, right? If you've got a lot of pieces out of heroic, so
Yeah.
yeah, maybe by this time tomorrow we'll be having some mythic kills and stuff to talk about.
I mean, dude, normal is also like something that had to be done this tier more so than ever. But we're starting to reach a point where I don't think people are going to be crafting yet, but probably starting to get to that point soon-ish. On top of that, there's still gear to be gained even after splits, and I think that is something that we don't always see is gear to be gained after splits. But this tier, there's crafting, there's the upgrade system, like committing your sparks and your crests and stuff like that. On top of that as well, you can also go do M plus because Mythic plus 20s drop 431 item level gear. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a pretty big deal.
right. Especially, I mean, the
Yeah.
way that it interacts with the upgrade system as well is really big for like upgrading your normal and heroic tier on the cheap, right? You wanna actually farm a piece in the same slot from M plus if you
Okay.
can.
So let's talk about heroic difficulty for a little bit. So heroic, this tier, and I mean, I think you and I can talk a bit anecdotally about this. I just have this on Raider.io, so it's not fully up to date. But as of time of recording, there are 14 guilds that have killed heroic Sarkareth on Raider.io. I think there are going to probably be a few more guilds filtering in here in just a little bit as some things begin to update. But this is about 2 days of progression already completed for North American guilds. 1 day completed for European guilds. There's basically one EU guild and 13 NA guilds that have at least killed heroic Sarkareth as it currently stands according to Raider.io. This was not the case for Razageth, and I think that heroic is actually shaping up to be a lot a bit easier than it has been the past couple of tiers. Shadowlands changed the game for heroic. Heroic and Shadowlands was so hard.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is an interesting question because like relative to the gear we have now, it definitely feels easier. I would say like Okay, heroic is dropping, call it 430 on average, right? Across the whole tier, 430 to 435-ish is the average,
Sure.
right? So if you had a raid fully equipped in 430 gear, how hard are the later bosses on heroic? I would say probably about the same as heroic Razageth is if you're in full, 400 gear. That's coming out of
Mm,
heroic, right? Full 405. It's just we weren't in that in the first week when people were doing heroic Razageth. So
okay.
I think that is the main factor because certainly, like, if you look at the first 7 bosses, very few wipes are happening for pretty much any guild that cleared any mythic vault. The first 7 bosses on heroic are just falling very easily. Echo of Neltharion, we're seeing a couple wipes here or there for those sorts of guilds, and a lot of wipes for AOTC type guilds. And then, of course, Sarkarath's something that very few guilds, as of yet, have. A lot of guilds have yet to even
I
pull this particular encounter because of the way that the
so
Omni token it works. Right, you kind of want that to be your last piece of loot after you've resolved all the RNG.
I mean, your guild killed it today, right?
We haven't killed heroic. No,
Okay.
we've done mythic bosses and normal and heroic splits up to 8 out of 9.
So we killed it in splits today, and it took us around 17 pulls for all 3 splits, and it took us around 10 pulls for the first kill. And so,
Yeah, much less than
I mean,
Razagath.
we had 35 pulls on Razagath, and we were not close to killing it yet. At the same point, like last tier, and so it's definitely, I would say that heroic. And it might be just a gear thing. I mean, and you might genuinely just be right. It might just be a gear thing. But I mean, even if we look at like early mythic bosses, and we can go and look at Wowhead, I think that this image on Wowhead is just great to kind of talk over as it shows, not that image, as it kind of shows the boss order. Kazara, Amalgamation Chamber, and Zakali Assault, if we flip over to Warcraft logs, have already been killed by guilds, and now some guilds are either working on Rashok or Forgotten Experiments. And so I think this is also the first tier in a while where we've seen the first couple of bosses go down this early. It's been, I mean,
Famously
Sepulchre took a while. Yeah.
right? And even Vault of the Incarnates, I think guilds were in there on the sort of a similar time scale with the first 2 bosses, but like Terra's ended up kind of being a brick wall for a few
Exactly.
days.
Yeah.
Whereas this time around, like Kazara, Assault, Amalgamation Chamber have all died in very few pulls for a lot of the guilds pulling these, right? Like my guild took 1 on Kazara, 2 on Assault, and we did a little for fun Rashok pull. That was just the end of one of our
what did
one of
you
our
think
nights.
of it? What did you think of Rashok?
It was cool. The fight seems cool. I mean, it's the same stuff that we saw. Right, it was 1 pull, right? Like how much are we getting out of that? It was
Yeah.
just for fun.
We had
We're,
like
we're gonna go obviously do Amalgamation Chamber and Forgotten Experiments next, but
we have like
yeah.
15 pulls in Forgotten Experiments, and it actually does a surprising amount of damage. It's not necessarily the fight is going to die very fast, but the amount of damage that it's putting on the players is
It's an interesting one as
caught
well
us off
because
guard a little bit.
the damage that you do stops the mechanics, right?
Yes.
On the bosses. So you have this tough, like you'd look at the damage pattern, you'd be like, oh, let's just drop a damage and bring in a healer, right? But then if you do that, you've got more time where you've got more bosses active. So
I mean,
nasty.
I think we're kind of projecting like a 5-minute fight, but like the last 2.5 minutes, you are getting absolutely owned. And it's like, how is this going to fare for the rest of the tier? I think it's a bit early to say, but even if you look at, okay, so maybe you don't have a ton of insight on Rashok, but Forgotten Experiments is not a cakewalk. And for these Race to World First guilds, I expect it to probably be somewhere in the order of 10 pulls, something like that. And then at that point, from testing, we've seen Zaskarn has to be one of the fastest paced bosses I've seen in recent memory, just how fast all of the mechanics come at you. Magmarax seems like it could be a patchwork single target wall. Like I think it's going to come down to damage tuning on a lot of these later bosses, but just by looking at the early bosses, the damage output is definitely there.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential here for the rest of this tier, and it really does depend like how much were they willing to turn the knob on these middle 3 of like Rashok, Ziskar, and Magmarax, and then also like Echo Neltharion. That's a huge question mark for a lot of people. And then of course the end boss is the most important for any tier.
Any final thoughts? I mean, I guess the only other thing maybe would be like Sarkarath. What are your general thoughts on Sarkarath after having seen it? I think that for me, it's like visual clarity maybe lacking, but
purple on purple.
Yeah, the fight looks sick.
It does look cool. It's a very stunning encounter arena. I'm kind of sad it's not like a Shadow Flame aesthetic because that was so cool and it's something we hadn't seen too much before. But all these like star fights like Rygalon and
Look at this.
I guess not Algalon, but like Rygalon and Starogger or whatever. It's reminiscent to those, which
Yeah.
I do think is pretty cool. So looking forward to. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of that boss room in the next couple of weeks. That's going to be something we'll be spending some time with.
Okay, so what are your kind of projections for the next 24 hours then?
Yeah, so I suspect we'll be seeing the first few pulls of mythic bosses out of Race to World First guilds. Maybe by this time tomorrow, if not by this time tomorrow, or
Uh,
soon after. Yeah.
I think that liquid. Okay, this time tomorrow
Yeah,
is
so we're
very
recording this a little
likely.
bit later than we're
Yeah.
usually going to. We're recording at like 8 a.m. Europe, midnight-ish NA time, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
so.
yeah.
Usually it'll be a little bit earlier than this is the plan.
By the time that the next video comes out, I still maybe expect Liquid to have pulled some mythic bosses, and hopefully about this time, like 24 hours from now, Echo is done with their splits.
Yeah, I mean Echo, I think are making really good time with their splits. They've been doing triple chord splits,
I
so
saw that. Yeah.
yeah, which is pretty. That's something we didn't see in Vault, right? Helpers were something that were talked a lot about going into Vault, but because Vault was so hard on Heroic, very few were able to actually be run. They weren't really able to parallelize their splits and have, 10 Echo Raiders, 20 Helpers be something that was possible. This time around, difficulty of the raid's a little bit lower, especially for these earlier bosses. It's been something they've been making
Yep.
big use out of and getting a lot of extra gear.
Okay, cool. I think that's going to finalize our video today. I think tomorrow we hopefully are going to at least see some mythic level bosses coming out of the Racer World First guilds,
Yeah.
or at a minimum, some random
If it's all
guilds.
just
will-
splits, if only splits have happened between now and tomorrow, look for how cooked the three topics we've got down here are going to be tomorrow because they get pretty cooked whenever nothing happens in the race.
There was that Halandras incident that one
Oh,
time.
the Halandras days were not good. Anyways, we'll see you then.